The next topic is erroneous beliefs underlying the four theories. We had already discussed the four theories and certain inadequacies which have been found, and now we will look at certain erroneous beliefs that basically underlie these four theories that we have just discussed. Discarding the anti-mentalist positions of some of the behaviorist theories, and we know that mentalists are the ones who propagate or who believe that completely look at the cognitive processes or mentalist processes with regard to language development, and behaviorists are the ones who look at the language development as a process of stimuli response and also take into account the social aspect and the cultural aspect in terms of developing the language behavior. Now, the position of some of the behaviorist theories who would treat thought as some sort of speech or behavior, there are certain erroneous beliefs which might have been held by other non-behaviorist theorists that led them to invalid conclusion. So these are the behavior aspect of behavior that have been propagated by some non-behaviorist theories. Although the behaviors have to do with the culture and the mentalist approach has to do with the thinking processes, but then we have certain non-behaviorists whose studies or whose beliefs have been proved erroneous, and based on these erroneous beliefs, some invalid conclusions have been reported. So now we will look at these beliefs one by one. There are three erroneous beliefs with regard to the question of language as well as thought. We will consider the three such mistaken beliefs one by one. The first erroneous belief is their analysis of language is adequate. Now, the most serious deficiency in the theorizing of Wolff, Sapir, Skinner, and so on, and other concerns, the assumption that the directly observable words or the structure of a sentence represent all of the semantic or thought elements of that sentence. These theorists drew conclusions largely based on what linguists today would consider a superficial surface structure analysis. Wolff states that our Indian language show that with the suitable grammar we may have intelligent sentences that cannot be broken into subject and predicates, and that the Hopi language contains no reference to time, either explicit or implicit. Such statements basically are made essentially because it is assumed that surface structure directly signifies all of the meaning of sentence. These linguists thus had a tendency to focus on the differences between languages. The idea that grammatical difference made thought differences was not long in coming. It seems that most of the linguists simply played with the idea because they offered little or no evidence for their assertion. They had other concerns. So except for Wolff, they did not provide evidence to support their contentions. It was only when Chomsky came along and provided underlying structure that it was realized that language had a lot of different languages had a lot of similarities. Then the second erroneous belief is the meaning of word is linguistic in origin. Except for the minor case of onomatopoeia, where the speech sounds imitating environmental sounds, the relationship between a word and its meaning is conventional. That is, there is no necessary relationship between the sound of a word and its meaning. There is no inherent reason for a dog to be called dog and not pen. Thus, when one hears a word for the first time, for example, any obscure English word, its meaning is not understood unless it is composed of known morphemes. The meaning that is to be associated with a particular sound sequence must be learned. It is not possible to know from the sound sequence alone. Meaning for words is acquired in four main ways. Number one, a sound form is associated with an object or situation. Second, a sound form is associated with idea or experience in mind. Number three, an inference. And number four, an analysis of known component morphemes may suggest a meaning of a word or meaning for the sound form. The last point, which says there are primitive languages and primitive human intelligence, one often hears observers of other cultures say that such and such a people are not logical or relational, or that they are somewhat deficient in intellect. Such supposed deficiencies are frequently attributed to their having a primitive language. Yet modern linguistic research has never found a single language that could be called primitive. Thus it is that Chomsky can with some assurance assert that all languages are similar complexity, with each having similar basic forms and operations. And while other linguists may disagree with Chomsky on what the basic form and operations might be, they do not disagree with all languages are constructed and operate with essentially the same principles. It appears to us that Sapir, Worf, and the other assumed that there was such a thing as primitive people and that those people had a primitive grammar. Since they supposed that the primitive grammar of these people reflected their thought, they concluded that their thought was primitive too. But we do have other opposing comments, other opposing points, especially Chomsky's and the other linguists who have opposed this particular point of view. To conclude the erroneous beliefs underlying the four theories, it is assumed that once one learns the premises that people hold, their behavior and statements that were previously thought to be strange or illogical immediately become rational.